Welcome, everybody, and especially to Sajni Patel. Thank you so much for joining us, the author of this month's book, The Trouble with Hating You. I'm sure we have lots of questions from our audience, and we all had received questions by email, so I will be sure to ask those as well. Like I said before, ladies, if you want to ask your question live, that's absolutely welcome. But there is a chat window as well that you can pop a question in there, or any feedback you have for Sajni, we will make sure she sees it, or that I relay it. So yeah, we want it to be as interactive as possible. This month we read your book, The Trouble with Hating You, which I realized you've been very busy since you wrote that one, which we'll
just a little bit
dive into after. But this is like kind of an older book for you now. So we appreciate you going back in the past and talking to us about it tonight. I'll just read your bio very quickly before we hear from you. But Sajni Patel is an award-winning author of women's fiction and young adult books, drawing on her experiences growing up in Texas, an inexplicable knack for romance and comedy, and the recently resurfaced dark side of fantastical things. Her works have appeared on numerous best of the year and must-read lists from Cosmo, Oprah Magazine, Teen Vogue, Apple Books, Audiophile, Beza, Austin's Women Magazine, NBC, The Insider, Pop Sugar, BuzzFeed, and many others. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So that's your official bio, but is there anything else you want to add? Or maybe you want to just add in one of those, there's a list of, if you go to her website, there's a list of other things about her that are quite interesting. Maybe you just want to expand a little bit on who you are exactly.
I'll try to go off the top of my head. I don't remember what my website says, even though I was just on it today. Yeah, so I am an Austinite. I grew up in Austin, Texas, born in India, and now I'm living in Hawaii. I write full-time. I write rom-com, women's fiction, young adults, and recently moving into the fantasy genre. And I'm a boring person, so I don't know what else to say.
I find that hard to believe, but let's get through our interview and then we can be the judge for ourselves. All right. So there is a raise your hand functionality for anybody who wants to ask the question live, and I'll be sure that you get to do that. Or like I said, you can use the chat window, but we do have lots of questions that have been asked through our social channels and through our email. So I will kick off with some of those. So there's so many questions about the book that's already, the second book, the next book that's already out, but I don't want to start with those. Here is a question that we received by email. It says, Leah has a lot of good friends in this book. Did you base any of these friends on your own friendships?
My friends will probably hurt me later for this, but I feel like because I'm an introvert and I'm living in Hawaii, I'm so far removed from my friends. And I kind of just made up friends that I wish I had here. Kind of like, the girl groups that we see on TV, The Big Bang Theory, Girlfriends. I don't know if anyone's seen that show. That used to be one of my favorite shows on BET. And just having that type of girl group that you can just go to and talk to and invite over at the whim of a hat and just have cheese platters and wine and talk about everything. So I was kind of just really yearning for a girl group. So to answer the question, not specifically based on anyone, but definitely inspired by what I wish I had here.
So let's go back a little bit. What took you to Hawaii then? It's not, you grew up in Texas, so you're a long way from home.
Yeah. So my husband actually grew up in Hawaii when he was younger. And when we got married, we lived on the mainland, but he's always felt disconnected from everything until we moved back. And just to let you know, if you have allergies, and Texas is full of allergens, just like all year round, there's something that's trying to kill you in the air. Living in Hawaii, he doesn't have any of those health issues. So, his fondness of growing up here plus his health brought us here.
Very good. The things we do for love.
I mean, yeah, I'm suffering living in Hawaii for
I was going to say, having said that, I don't think it'd be a big hardship to have to live in Hawaii. So we do have a question here from Dawn. She's put this in the chat window. She says, you mentioned Indian Tex-Mex dishes, and she's curious what type of dishes that would be.
It's kind of just made up things. I remember my aunt very recently made enchiladas, but she made it with a lentil that's very common in Indian cooking. It's a mung bean, I believe. And she had like some Indian spices. And so there are some similar spices, some similarities between Indian food and Tex-Mex. So she made enchiladas with the cheese and the enchilada sauce, but then she filled it with Indian ingredients. So it's just a fusion. And we actually have well, I should say we, because I'm no longer in Texas, but in Texas, in Austin, there's actually a fusion truck called Curry Taco, which kind of tells you it all. And then it combines Tex-Mex with Indian food. So it's a thing. It's a real thing now.
It sounds delicious. I love both. So I think that mixing them together you can't go wrong. All right, here. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I apologize. Stanimira. She says, my question is, are there any parts of your female protagonists that you feel represent yourself, or if their love story represents your own love story?
If you're talking about just Leah, I don't think so. Preeti, which is what the next book is based on, she definitely is me with the anxiety and introvertness. But Leah is a type of person that I wish I was more like, more vocal and strong, and she's opinionated and very feminist, and I just wish I was a bit more outspoken like her and just went for it and less scared. I admired that about her. So when I wrote her, I was really aiming to have a type of free-spirited woman that I wish I was.
I feel like we missed a part here. How did you get into writing? Have you always written? Did you start when you were young, or what was your journey like to become an actual published author?
So I started writing short stories when I was in 5th grade, when I was 10. And I was always, back then I was really into fantasy and horror and sci-fi. So my first short story was about vampire bunnies. I had the Crayola crayon drawing to go with it and everything. It was great. Then in high school, I wrote my first 2 novels. They were trash because I didn't know how to write well. I just wrote because it was a story in my head. Over time, it took several years to really understand and grasp the craft of writing, of how to write well, of plots and pacing and character arcs and all these things. And when I first tried to pursue being a professional writer, getting an agent and a publishing deal, that was a while back. And, back then I heard this thing that a lot of editors, I hope, are cringing for ever having said this, but I used to get a lot of rejections because I wrote about brown people, about brown characters, and they were calling it a niche market. They didn't know how to market it. Who's really going to read that? So I'm very thankful for other South Asian and just POC authors who came ahead of me, stronger than I was at that point, where my writing is stronger than my writing was at that point, and really paved the way to say, like, no, this should all be on the same level. We are all diverse. So that was the majority of my publishing backgrounds. And then when I landed my wonderful current agents, she kind of just went headfirst into everything, and I absolutely love her, and it's so critical and vital for me to have an agent that I can trust, because I leave all the business and publishing things to her, and that allows me to just write, and I'm able to write a lot because I don't have to worry about that. And so it's a great thing to see the shift in moving from being worried about getting published and all the ins and outs of publishing to just being able to focus on writing.
So going back to what you just said about, do you feel, that's terrible, but it's not surprising. Do you feel that there had been a shift made by the time you got your agent and your publishing house?
Yes, definitely. We were seeing a lot more South Asian authors out there, and just POC authors, and there was a whole big we need diverse books movements and own voices and all that. So there was this big push by everyone to just have publishers open their eyes and really take a look at what is wrong with the whole situation. And of course, we still want to get married. We still want to put out good books. So it's not that like to say like you just pick up any random book because of a certain person wrote it, but we're still looking at quality. But don't say you can't market a book about brown people, because there's lots of brown people. There's lots of people who want to read about characters that are not like them.
Absolutely. Which sort of brings us nicely to the next question. Your book is a romance at heart, but you touch on some very important subjects such as female empowerment, sexual assault, guilt, and belonging. How important was it to you to speak to those elements?
When I initially wrote The Trouble with Hating You, it was a women's fiction. It was all on Leah's point of view. There wasn't going to be a romance really with it. So I already knew these topics were going to be covered. I already knew what kind of person she was and the things that she was struggling with. And so the romance came along a little bit later, but it was really nice to see a male in her life, a man in her life who could take the situation appropriately and help her with it. And it was important to me to talk about sexual assault because I have been sexually assaulted. And I know from experience that, in the culture where I grew up, this is not to say like all Indian culture or all, Southern culture. In my situation where I grew up, these things were kind of pushed under the rug and the blame was always shifted onto the victim. And so going back to what I said in the very beginning, I'm not I'm an introvert, so I'm not a very confrontational person. I don't know how to speak out as much as some people might know how to speak out. So writing this book and in all of my writing is sort of a way to approach topics that I may otherwise never really approach with someone.
So it's no surprise, or it's no secret, but I'm romance is not my genre at all. But so that's why I appreciated this. So women's fiction memoir. That's sort of where I stay. So I was really appreciative of the fact that there was so much depth to your book.
Thank you. And honestly, I'm not a romantic person, so I don't even know how I got here.
Well, you told the love story very, very well.
Thank you.
Okay, we have so many questions now. Let me just ask them one by one. Can you tell us more about what you're writing in fantasy? For your information, the best line in the whole book was end quote, definitely, Rima is awesome, on page 20.
The fantasy that I'm working on has already sold, so I can't really say too much about it until there's an announcement. But it is about, it takes the character of Medusa from Greek mythology. And if anyone knows much about her, her origin story starts off with her being raped. So I see myself coming back to this, the rape culture. And it is her origin story with a lot of nods to Greek mythology, but told in an Indian fantasy world with Indian monsters from Indian folklore.
Oh, wow. Do you find it hard to switch genres, or because not too many authors do that? Usually they kind of stick to one, but you seem to be talented in many.
I am all over the place. I grew up reading fantasy and sci-fi and horror. So, and that's what I enjoy with entertainments, with TV and movies, and also reading. So I'm very happy to be able to get back into that space, and happy that I'm not pigeonholed into just one genre, but that I have the ability to write what I want to write.
Awesome. Shayna asks a question here. She said that their book club, Edmond, Oklahoma, they met last night and they loved your book. They especially loved the culture, and she wondered how much was influenced by your own culture and religion.
A lot of it was influenced by how I grew up. I'm not really a religious person, so I'm not in that environment too much. I haven't been in that environment too often, but the culture is just ingrained in my life because it's just who we are with my family. So a lot of it does stem from things that I know and things that I've learned, but not necessarily issues or people that I've had to come across in my life.
Okay. Jody says, hi, I really enjoyed your book and I liked that you had a lot of Indian culture in the book, arranged marriages, how women versus men can be treated. And I also liked how you allowed Leah and Jay's characters to have a more modern view on these topics. Oh, just a comment, not a question.
Oh, thank you.
Rima, this is more of a comment as well. She says, representation matters. I so wish we had books like this when she was growing up in Houston.
Same.
Courtney says, that was something I loved. I learned a little bit about Indian culture. Thank you. Next question from Renee is, do you anticipate yourself writing a number 3 in the series?
You know, I get asked this question often, and I'm like so happy because people want to stay in the world and they want to see another book. I'm guessing like Rima, maybe probably Sana. I'm guessing maybe Sana because she's you know, she's not married or anything yet. So when I sold The Trouble with Hating You, the publisher picked it up as a 2-book deal, and there are no current plans, sorry, for book 3. I haven't discussed it with my publisher. They haven't asked for it, and I honestly don't have I don't have a vision for a 3rd book. But if I do have something that comes up, you'll know because I'll scream it all across social media. But right now, nah, I'm sorry.
Does the publisher that published the Trouble with Hating You, will that be the same publisher that publishes the other genres?
No, this is just the publisher for The Trouble with Hating You is just a publisher for the Trouble with Hating You series, so just for these 2 books.
Okay. So a question that I got from email, the 2nd book of this series is already out, featuring another favorite character from The Trouble with Hating You, Preeti. You reference Preeti a lot in the book, but you also allude to her past lover, Daniel. So she's very excited that there's already a new book all about that relationship. And can you tell us a little bit more about that book?
Yeah, so that's First Love Take 2. It came out back in September. It's a story about Preeti, who is dealing with life. She is coming out of her medical residency. She's inundated and stressed out because, as we all know, the medical field is very stressful, and she's dealing with anxiety. So I touch on the topic of mental health quite a bit, and she is also dealing with trying to find a place to live, and has to end up with Daniel, who's her ex. And this isn't really a spoiler, like it's in the first page. So and Daniel is the love of her life, but things happen, and now they may or may not work through it to try to find their happily ever after if it's with one another. So Daniel in the book is actually a Black man. And so one of the other things that I touch on is racism, because there is quite a bit of anti-Blackness that I've experienced in the South Asian community and just in the South in general. So that was really important for me to touch on that as well.
Well, I need to pick up a copy as well. Absolutely. Dawn would like to know, she says, Jay seems like a perfect guy, always saying and doing the right thing. Is he based on a real person?
That's another question I get asked a lot. I'm sorry, there's no Jay. There's no Jay out there. I wrote him just for Leah. I really wrote him to balance her out, because as you know, she's a bit rough around the edges and she can be harsh. So Jay is kind of there to meet her, but to also be her equal in various ways. So no, sorry.
Darn.
Darn.
Stan Nimira, she says, oh my gosh, I'll be a resident in July. Definitely have to check out your other book. How did you choose to write about a character in a medical residency? I have an additional question to this one. Was it hard? Because like I watch TV with like, you know, Grey's Anatomy, and I wonder how hard it is for like the actors to learn all the terminology. Is there a lot of medical terminology in it?
There are some words here and there. I understand that as a reader, you may not know all the technical stuff, and you probably don't want to have to look it up in a dictionary or, you know, get sidetracked from the story because you're like, what the heck is that word? So no, there isn't that much terminology. There's, like I said, things here and there. And the reason why she is in the medical residency is because it's kind of a nod to my background in the medical field. I'm not a doctor, but I've worked with a lot of doctors and surgery. So that's a space and a field that I'm very comfortable with. And also, sometimes I'm a lazy writer and I just don't want to have to do a ton of research. So at least I can write upon my experience.
Very good. So Beryl says she really enjoyed how you told the story from a strong woman's perspective. I really enjoyed how you told the love story from a strong woman's perspective and how told her story. Sorry, I don't exactly understand that, but mostly just how it was told from how Leah was a strong character. Was that always your intention?
Yes. I actually wrote a different book before Leah, and Leah was a side character. And that book didn't really go anywhere, but Leah always stuck out to me. So that character in the first book was very quiet and introverted. She was basically me and boring. So Leah was the strong friend. She's a character that always spoke out. And when I wrote her story, I wanted to make sure that she retained that strength throughout the book.
Now you've moved on and you have a new book coming out in April, which is titled My Sister's Big Fat Indian Wedding. Do you have a sister to start with?
I don't. However, I will say that this book is based off of my brother and sister-in-law's big fat Indian wedding. So it was inspired by a lot of, real things that happened.
Sure. When did they get married?
Oh, they got married back in 2018. Actually, okay. They just had their 4-year anniversary and a baby.
Oh, wow. Very good. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and what we can look forward to?
Yeah. So My Sister's Big Fat Indian Wedding is a young adults rom-com, as well as a musical book. The main character is a senior in high school, and she wants to not go to law school like everyone in her family and wants to get into Juilliard to play the violin. She's very gifted with the violin, and she has to juggle all the things for her sister's wedding, which an Indian wedding, at least the one that I experienced through my brother, has a lot of events, and it was like 5 or 6 days long. It's just like it was wild. So there's a lot of things that she has to do, but she's also wanting to get to the music competition. So that's why she's juggling that. And then, there's also a competitor who she may or may not have a crush on. So there's a lot of things in there. And the book really touches on a lot of strong female characters. There's a huge sisterhood in the story, like almost 90% of the characters are girls. So I really wanted to encourage and look at female friendships in the book.
Very good. Well, I love the cover. How much input do you have into the covers?
The cover, that I don't know if you guys can see. Oh, it's kind of blurry. I have my blur thing on. Anyway, you have to look it up because the cover is gorgeous. And I actually my publisher, and I've never heard of this happening before, but my publisher asked for pictures in the video from the wedding. They have like a 15-minute highlight video from the wedding, and I sent that to them. And so the artist took the images from the video and the pictures and incorporated that into the book. So you know how readers say they can see themselves in a book because of the characters, but now I can say I see myself, my family on the cover of my book, and it's pretty wild and it's awesome. I love it. It's just so special to me.
What did your family say when they saw it?
They loved it. They're like, oh, I know who that is. That's me. Everyone thinks that's them. And I'm like, I don't know who is who, but I do know my brother is on there because he's a groom on the horse. And I do know that my sister-in-law and my brother are in the lower left corner, the lower right corner, because that's actually one of their wedding pictures. So yeah.
That's cool. Megan would like to know, what was the title of that first story with Leah in it, and is it published?
That book was something that I wrote a long, long time ago. Like I said, it didn't really go anywhere. So it was not anything that you want to read. But I kind of redid the story with Preeti. I made her a little bit, hopefully more likable and more interesting than what the original character what the original book was. So if you want to get an idea of what that book was, you'll have to just read First Love Take Two. It's not the same at all, but it's all you're going to get.
Fair enough. Linda, good question, because I actually wanted to touch a little bit on The Knockout, which was published on January 26, 2021. And that's a previous book. So Linda asks, she says, a bit off topic, but can you tell us a bit about being an MMA fighter? How did you get involved in that world? It's not something I would expect in the bio of a romance author.
Well, like I said, with rom-com, I'm not really sure how I got here with my love for fantasy and horror and being a martial artist. So I was not actually an MMA fighter. I think that's somewhere, but it's incorrect. I was in okay, so MMA. Not the MMA you're thinking about, not like, I kind of think like, cage fighting kind of MMA, not that kind of, no. I told you before, I'm scared, so I can't do that. But I was in mixed martial arts. I was in mixed martial arts growing up, and I was in a class that incorporated 5 different martial arts. And so that's where the mixed martial arts come from. And we did, sparring and things like that, but we weren't like going to be in a cage and fighting for spectators or anything like that. And it was fun. I picked it up because my friend was in Taekwondo, so I kind of wanted to outdo her. So I took, a class with 5 martial arts instead of just 1. Oh yeah, I know you're pitching a cage fighter. I think a lot of people picture cage fighters when they think MMA. I didn't advance very much in martial arts because I was scared and I had like a giggling problem. I was always giggle, which always got me in trouble. So I was always in the corner, doing push-ups and squats as punishment because I couldn't control my giggling. So I didn't get very far with that. But still don't cross me on the street. If the image you have in your head is of me being a cage fighter, then let's keep it that way. But I will say in high school or in college, I met this really great woman, and she was just gorgeous and charismatic and so nice and bubbly, and she'd invited me to come see her practice. And I was like, oh sure, I really want to be your friend, so let's I'll come watch you practice. She was a great person. And I saw her practice, and she was a Muay Thai fighter, which is the sport in a knockout. And Muay Thai is kind of like a combination between martial arts and kickboxing. And when I saw her fighting, I was like, man, that's intense. That's wild. And to see so many facets of a person, like to see someone who is very, quote unquote, feminine or soft and bubbly, and then see this other side of her where she's an extreme fighter, was something that really left an impression on me. And that's kind of how I came about the character of Karina in the Knockout, to have a person who is, she's into pink and glitter, but she's also a badass fighter. And she's a teenager, so she's dealing with bullies and her self-worth and trying to fit into her culture. But at the same time, she's a badass fighter. So that was the whole premise of the story, and that's where that came about.
That's cool. If anybody hasn't read that, you should check that book out. I like the cover as well. All right, here. Emma has a question. She says she appreciates that Leah's character allows readers to walk in the shoes of a survivor and learn from their healing process. It has helped me so much. If you are comfortable answering, did you use writing Leah's story as a way to heal from your trauma of sexual assault?
Not really. It's just a way for me to breach a subject with what I see a lot in the community and in society. Just a lot of things that I wanted to say, but never had the courage to say to certain people. So it wasn't really a way for me to deal with the trauma at that point. When I wrote the story, I'd already dealt with it and was over it enough. I guess I don't know if I'll ever 100% be over it, but I'm glad to know that it's helped readers. Thank you for sharing that. I have actually received a lot of messages from readers who kind of cried out and poured out their heart on the page to me, to tell me that they saw so much of themselves in Leah as a survivor, and how it's helped them to cope, and how in some cases it's helped them to open conversation about how we treat people, and maybe how what we say to each other and how we view someone who might be a survivor or a victim, and really putting our foot down and saying something when we think something's happening, and and not shaming the victim. That's like one of the biggest things that I wanted to show and to speak about was, why are we shaming victims? We should be going after the perpetrator. We should be going after the problem. And the problem is not a woman who was just existing in her space.
I mean, in any case, it's never the victim's fault, but she was a child as well. So
mm-hmm.
Rita has asked here, was Leah's father's character based on any of your uncles in the community? Ooh.
No, no. I've come across uncles that have rubbed me the wrong way, figuratively, but I actually saw this on someone commented this, like, they grew up in Houston and around mandirs in Houston, which is the Hindu temple, and they've never met an uncle like this. Well, it's fiction, like there might be a guy like that out there, but he was not based on anyone that I personally know. He was created out of my frustration and my hate of the whole situation. So he was not based on someone. He's definitely not based on my father. If anyone was thinking that, my dad is not like that at all.
That was a hard pill to swallow, the father. I mean, obviously what happened to her was so horrific as what she went through, but then having her father just so utterly not believe her. Rita has just expanded on her comment. She says she totally thinks uncles like that do exist, not common, but they do exist, she thinks.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I know there are these type of people everywhere.
Jill says Jay's mother was one of my favorite characters, especially at the end, and I think her backstory would have made a really fun book to read.
I have thought of her backstory, but I don't think that anything will come of that.
She was a cool mom. I liked her as well, and how open she was, and how, I mean, when you compare her to Leah's mother, who was, I mean, obviously she was a victim of abuse herself, but just the characters of Leah and her mother, they were so like polar opposite. Leah was so strong in some ways, and her mother was so unfortunate. Oh, Shanna thinks it should be a novella. So before we finish, let's just get into a little bit about what you read. What's on your nightstand? Who are your favorite authors?
I really enjoyed Mexican Gothic. That was one of my favorite books. I listened to it on audio, and it just upped the creepy factor quite a bit. So if you're into horror, I do recommend that book on audio book at night with no lights on, and let's see how scared you get because I was like, I can't handle this. And I'm currently reading an adult fantasy called Kai, and I know I'm butchering that. I'm sorry. It is coming out from Orbit in April. Okay. And it is an Indian fantasy. So that's what I'm currently reading.
And what are your go-to genre? I feel like once you're an author and you've published and everybody loves you, your publisher is always sending you books, asking you to read them and sort of like write the intros and stuff. So, but like in an ideal world, what would you always be reading? Would there be one genre that you would stick to all the time?
No, I don't have that kind of focus. I like a lot of fantasy and horror, but I'm also really into nonfiction lately. So I kind of just like a mix of both, or a mix of several genres.
Very good. And are there any classics that you would recommend?
I can't think of any on the top of my head that I love.
What about podcasts or Netflix shows that you've binge watched recently?
I've been watching The Witcher.
Ah, okay.
I'm in it for Henry Cavill and he has like these sharp canines that I don't know. That's just something about those teeth. But I do enjoy The Witcher.
Very good. All right. Oh, Megan has a quick question here. Can you quickly speak at all about the short story you wrote for the collaboration? That was one of your first books?
Yeah, I think you're probably referring to Together Apart. It was a YA anthology that came out in 2020. It was inspired by the pandemic, and I wrote it. And it was a story about there are 9 authors in the anthology. We all wrote short stories about finding love during pandemic time, and all the stresses and things like that. My story is about, oh yeah, that's one. Thanks, Megan. That's the one. It's called One Day, and my story is about 2 kids who find each other across the alley, like their balconies face one another, sort of. And the kid is, they're going through hard times. They're going through mental struggles and headaches from being on Zoom for school all the time, and not knowing what's the situation the world's going to be. So it was just like a cute little story about finding romance and some type of happy ending, even though we were going through some really, really bad times. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic. So yeah, we were going through some bad things.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us and for writing the book so that we could read it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we look forward to, I mean, you have so much coming up. When you go to your website, it actually says like there's like 4 or 5 books listed as to be released. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually, toward the end of 2021, I signed 5 more books across 3 publishers. So the fantasy is going to be a duology. It's not yet announced. I have another set of rom-coms coming out, one next year, and then another YA that's also not announced yet. So I have things coming out until 2025, at least, and hoping to continue past that.
So how much of that is written?
I just turned in 3 books.
Wow.
It's been a busy, busy time. So I have 2 more books out of the 5 to write.
Amazing. Emma says, thank you. Oh, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you in Austin in March.
Hey, are you going, Emma? Are you going to South by Southwest? If you guys don't know, I'll be at South by Southwest. It's a big music festival, but Emma, you might be like the only person that comes see me.
That's
So that makes me so happy because I've been so nervous. Thanks, Emma. Please talk to me when you're there.
Well, good luck with that as well. And thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight and for all your wonderful questions. It's been really wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.